Sonic Universe issue 79. So we see Silver facing a portal with a face on it, which is pretty confusing. And he wishes someone could hear him, someone who could stop this. So it's starting out in media res with you detached and confused and irritated. This is by a different writer, so this better be good. Because I'm just wondering how a guy with telekinesis who can close portals whenever he wants and open them would ever have any trouble with anyone. Any threat he would face, he could just send to another universe by making a new portal. And that's if he's being merciful. So if the character is overpowered as this, you need to be very careful about which kind of plot to write him in, or the story will be impossible to take seriously if you're thinking about it. We see Ong City 200 years in the future, where a bunch of dreary citizens are in a city where smoke is coming out of a chimney. It really is a bad future, because in the direction our future is headed now, I can't buy that we would still have smoke coming into the skies at that point. We have so many better energy sources now, and we know that pollution sucks. I assume the fact that Ong City is supposed to be on Angel Island of the future is going to come into play at some point, because it'd be silly otherwise. That was the case in Sonic Rivals 2. Anyways, I'm glad we're seeing the people of Silver's future, so he has something to actually fight for. Predictably, the people that are greeting them are evil government jerks. They can't possibly be a good government, oh no. I can tell because the city council reminds everyone that they must report for their assigned work shifts. What if someone's sick or injured or in a coma? Or in jail? What if all of the jobs are full and so it's literally impossible for someone to go to a work shift? This place sucks, and there will be riots everywhere immediately to get rid of such blatant worker disregard. I don't think any country has mandatory work attendance for every job that's punishable by death otherwise. Or else they'd be executing every day until they have a really small population. So right away this is annoying me by being needlessly over the top. And stereotypical. Because of course they're an evil government. It's a bad future. It was actually more creative in Sonic 06 because there are no people, so there's no government. The city council's faces look so weird that they're probably robots. After all, this is a sci-fi fantasy universe. But they're wearing cloaks like the Legionnaires, or that civilian we saw in the story earlier. We see what reminds me of a swap bot on the screen, and the public service announcement says that their robots will aid anyone who is unsure about their assignment and escort them to their place of employment. Silver thinks, yeah, right. And the announcement says that if they see someone avoiding their civic duty, they should alert the council. They should explain why they would alert the council. Like, we'll pay you $10. Then a robot shows up, intimidating Silver, and says that any citizens assigned to the teal class work shift have to report. There's colorblind people, you know. I guess they'd be told what their color is by someone else. There's inevitably going to be unemployed people because there's only so many open job positions at a time. So, eventually, if all the jobs are taken, it's going to be stupidly unfair begging people to get mad to punish unemployed people. But maybe there isn't unemployment in this place because of this very system. This kind of government world building would feel better if it was applied to Sonic's time period, because that could be how Eggman's running things badly. This does look like a swap bot after all, so maybe it's based on how he used to run things. All the way 200 years into the future? So the heroes' freedom fighting is pointless? Because Eggman's legacy will live on? Again, that's why I refuse to think of Silver is not from another dimension that happens to be in the future, if his future is as depressing as this. The robot's allowed to keep talking all this time instead of Silver instantly destroying it with his telekinesis, because drama. We got in one panel. At first when I saw that red fox, I thought about Fiona. But of course it's not her, because while Penrose's concepts can be used just fine, his characters would cost Archie money. Well, I don't trust the new writers with Fiona anyways, so good. Silver shouts hey, and then gets inexplicably scared because he thinks they're gonna take him too. Okay, so this better fucking mean that this takes place before he found out he had telekinesis. If it doesn't, then this writer fucking sucks and the story is ridiculous. He's Silver the Hedgehog. He has no reason to be afraid of any robots anywhere. If he's not a known hero yet, that does explain why no one's recognized him and he's just walking around without a disguise. But if I was supposed to assume that, I should have been shown a text box right away telling me how far back this takes place. Because this was released after World Unite. And I'm pretty sure telekinesis would be something he'd have discovered he had as a baby. Because he'd think about stuff coming up to him, or moving around, and he'd move around his hands. So either way, this is dumb. If he's always been the type to speak out for people being treated unfairly like this, he should have started smashing robots as a freedom fighter a long time ago. This wouldn't be the first time he's seen this. How old is he? I'm surprised that the robot didn't target him for dissent right after he yelled out, when he assumed that would happen. Even the character in the story had more logic than the writer did. Silver thinks that a little telekinesis couldn't hurt, and he makes sure the victim escaped. And he just thinks good luck instead of outright destroying the robot. I guess he was keeping his telekinesis a secret this whole time, and so were his parents. I guess he wants to keep his home and not have to deal with robots going after him all the time. So he doesn't want to be so conspicuous as to destroy the robots outright and make it known that someone can do that. Why does it have to be written this way? Sonic didn't do this. Sonic fought Eggman. Can he just be a hero who doesn't live with the future people, like we always assume? This is convoluted. I thought Silver was a hero, not a coward. That's why he went out of his way to fight Iblis over and over again in the game. If he was a coward, not a grand hero, he would have just avoided it. This would be a lot less confusing if this was released before we saw him handling Ifrit like it was absolutely nothing. So all he does is break the energy link between the handcuffs and the robot. Realistically, the civilian would be inevitably captured anyways, because he still has the handcuffs on him, announcing to everyone that he should be arrested, and he has no apparent way of getting them off. So Silver's an idiot for thinking he'd have any luck. I knew from the start that it was pointless to even help him that way. He'd just inevitably get recaptured because he let the robots live. He could have used his telekinesis to make them have a malfunction. I guess he thought even making a small malfunction inside of them would be too suspicious. I'm so sick of the main characters in Sonic being idiots. The only reason I'm still interested in this is that it's a new setting. But even then, I've seen a dystopian futuristic city before. It was in Metropolis Zone in Sonic the Comic, and it felt more realistic there. And I can't believe we still haven't been told what exact job the guy was jerking from. I guess it doesn't matter? I thought everyone here had the same job. What's Silver's job? Isn't he a teenager? We're learning about Silver's home. Shouldn't it be mandatory to... This is just so confusing to me because I'm used to thinking of Silver as practically an omnipotent god because this is a guy with telekinesis. How is he in a weaker underdog position like this? I've been assuming the entire time that Ong City is the only city with people left, or at least one of the only cities in the small area, and so people don't leave because they have nowhere safe to go. So the government is corrupt because it's their only choice, so they can get away with it in a monopoly. Except that's not how it works. People would revolt inevitably even if there was only one city in the world. There used to be a time in history where no country had democracy, and every monarchy was absolute. But that didn't stick, even if there was apparently no place for them to go to instead. My point is, it's really off-putting and confusing that Silver's somehow not the ultimate hero by this point, when he's the most overpowered character next to Shadow. It's counterintuitive. It's not like he's Tails or Ray. Then I'm expected to believe he regularly practices his telekinesis on a trash pile. I can imagine he wouldn't need any practice with telekinesis. You just imagine moving and move your arms. And he would have gotten great at it years ago. At least it was amusing they talked as if his hand was saying, "Sure, Silver." And he said he needs to stop talking to himself. And it was also sad by showing the realistic result of him being lonely. I guess he's an orphan with no friends. Still, this wouldn't happen. What prevented him from finding out he had telekinesis until really recently? We're missing a step here. He has telekinesis. He can just build a home for himself whenever he wants. He doesn't need a normal home like everyone else that he'd have to be a coward to keep. Unless this is the kind of place with such a climate that he would literally die if he didn't have air conditioning. It's not like this is a cold winter place. It's not the winter, and so he would need a normal home to have heating. It might be more interesting if it was winter. What's keeping him from destroying all the robots and forcing the city council to be nice to people? Absolutely nothing. He has no reason to be scared of the council. This is the least believable character to put in an underdog role against mortals. Against anything. I could imagine him facing an immortal god, and I couldn't buy that he couldn't telekinesis it apart. Even Flynn wrote better, because he wrote an arc where his antagonist was Enerjack Knuckles, who was omnipotent and invincible, and only kept his enemies alive because he was bored. So of course he was equally matched, and Silver could only waste his time as a vital distraction. So Professor Vaughn witnesses him using his magic on crates and tells him happily to continue. So this is when he met Vaughn? Is this going to lead to a gigantic waste of time where no necessary plot progression happens? Yep. Vaughn already has a psychic energy detector, and this is the first time he's used it by coincidence. And he says that he's just what he needs. What is he powering it with? The Chaos Drive? Silver keeping his powers a secret is the opposite of how I'd imagine him. Everyone pictures him as using his powers, fighting Iblis all the time. And the secret would be out among everyone because of that. Like, wouldn't he be proud of his powers and show them off? That's the only thing he is proud of. At least this is new. That's the easiest way to hold my attention. But it's too frustrating to be worth it. Speaking of frustrating, Vaughn asks who he, Vaughn, even is, and takes a minute to remember. This may be his gag, but this isn't his design, so I'm insulted that they thought it was good enough. They changed his body shape, but not his green skin. Oh, that's too unrealistic, but not his green skin. Silver then says that he doesn't want to get wrapped up in anything from the Science Center because he's heard stories. Again, since when is Silver a coward? Vaughn says that his psychic abilities are just what they need to counteract the portals, and coincidentally, a portal opens up below them right after he mentions one, because insanely convenient plot convenience. I guess this is believable because the mere existence of the Genesis portals has already thrown all logic out the window. They can appear anywhere at any time, so they would show up here. But it's so unlikely that it's clear it only happened at such a narratively convenient time because it's a story written by someone. But this is a good thing because it keeps the pacing faster having them fall into it right away. I thought our time would be wasted with them in a lab together. It's just that I assumed Silver was longtime friends with Vaughn when I first saw Vaughn in the reboot. Wouldn't it have been nicer instead of needlessly depressing if you didn't have a bad first impression of him? And instead he was his adopted apprentice? Maybe even adopted son? Also, if Genesis portals have been showing up for 200 years, it's impossible to buy that Silver wouldn't know what one is by now. Anytime one showed up, that would be talked about. That'd be all over the news, and I'm sure even the city council would rather people harmlessly talk about a portal than something else. They fall into the portal, but I'm just frustrated that I don't get to learn what Silver meant by the stories I heard about scientists. Then Silver is a complete idiot again, because he inexplicably asks Vaughn if he's doing this and tells him to stop doing it, when obviously Vaughn was surprised by the portal and he wouldn't inconvenience himself with it. He tells Silver that he can save them with his powers. Wasn't that immediately obvious? Why didn't Silver immediately use his telekinesis to fly and save both of them? They could get out of the portal right away. I wasn't expecting them to stay in a place with a purple sky like the portal. I was expecting them to immediately fall into the grass in some other universe, so they could world build that place. Why would they be floating like they were sent into a void? This writing is so weird. This is something that actually reminds me of pre-Flynn Archie. Like that story where the Freedom Fighters as kids were arbitrarily sent to another universe that was just a void and stuff purely because plot. I'm glad we still get to see stories about characters zone hopping with portals because that was a thing in Preview Archie. And it was completely forgotten about for a long time. But I didn't miss it being arbitrary, and this is not an actual world they're in. It's just purple. Why? Why would they fall into a void? Like, how would a void exist? Silver's grabbed by shadowy creatures, and for some reason when Vaughn tells Silver to use his powers, he insists that they don't work like that. Fuck you, of course they do. Keep it simple. Sometimes trying too hard is just annoying when the only reaction you get is, huh? So of course it works. Like Silver was so confident in that ridiculous statement. So why are they being grabbed by shadowy figures? What did they have to gain in it? This writing sucks. It's not like they're calling Silver and him aliens and reacting accordingly. They don't want to get them arrested for being illegal immigrants into their world. If they wanted to eat them, they would have immediately started biting them. So of course Silver takes Vaughn out of the portal and closes it, insisting on taking an entire page to do so. I wish I could learn more about that world they're in. Instead, Silver closes the door on world building. There has to be another fucking page of him closing it? He's got telekinesis. At that point, I don't buy that he'd take longer than 1 second to close it. I have a question. Wouldn't Silver been caught on camera using his powers a long time ago? If the whole thing about why the city sucks is that there's better technology and so robots oppress people, wouldn't the city council also use technology to have flying cameras be surveillance so that they catch any potential criminal? Why not? Even in real life, nearly every building has cameras, and not to mention traffic lights. So Silver would have been caught by now, but clearly the writer didn't think the world all the way through. Maybe I wouldn't have been bored enough to realize this plot hole existed if it wasn't made bored and detached by an entire page being wasted. If the plot always cut to the chase, I'd just be talking about the next plot point. I think the story is dragging out him closing the portal so that he'll look more impressive and powerful, but no, this is just making him look weak. He's so weak that Silver says he's not going to be able to do that again for a while. And somehow he didn't know that he could. When if he has telekinesis, him being able to move something with his mind was the obvious assumption. It was nice to see Vaughn hug him, but it's offset by the fact that he just has to hug him from behind and startle him. Vaughn confuses Silver with technobabble, worrying that the portal showing up too many times in total would result in the destruction of the world. What makes him think he could do anything to prevent this? The portals will show up on their own no matter what. By the time Silver closes them, they're already added to the portal counter. Which I don't even see why it exists for portals that have been closed anyways. The portals inevitably have to close by themselves because otherwise the whole world would be just portals by now. So what's the point of having Silver close them earlier? It's not like the whole world has been ruined by zone hoppers. Unless that's what caused the city council and that's where they're from. But like that'd be interesting to explain. All those civilians are Mobians, not aliens. And because this showed up again, I feel like making it official. This whole the world's gonna end because portals showed up too much garbage is a Ken Pender's concept. This was the excuse for the apocalypse threat in 25 years later. So that's it, I'm counting it. We're at 8 now. Because this concept is apparently considered important enough to last beyond Worlds Unite. Now it's an arc, just like when Penders did it. Vaughn says that the tear in space-time was much more severe than his calculations predicted. How does he know this? He doesn't say he measured it with a device. All he has is the psychic detector. Wouldn't Vaughn not be the only one to have one of these if they can exist, and it's the future and it'd be mandatory to get your kid tested for psychic powers for the military? Maybe Vaughn powers it with an Emerald or Master Emerald shard, and that's why he's the first and only person to use this chaos detector, essentially. I don't see how it would be any different than Chaos Force. Silver says that people with powers who go to the science center don't ever come back. And Vaughn says that's ridiculous, and the city council keeps everything safe. He's supposed to be a genius. How is it safe that people get arrested by a robot for missing a day of work? And he tells Silver that he's saving the universe whether he likes it or not, because apparently Silver actually showed resistance to this. But not because he knows it's totally pointless, which is the only logical reason why. Instead, Vaughn had to force him to save the universe. What in the world is going on? I came into this from the start feeling like this writer was overrated too. Now I'm sure of it. This is so confusing and frustrating that's written exactly like it's by Flynn anyways. So I'm probably going to remember it as such. Then the city council finds out with their technology that a Genesis portal was found and they want to localize the location. And yet they don't outright see Silver behind a camera, which I was expecting right away at that point. Okay, it does make sense that they'd assume that because this is the first time a portal was closed, and that's such a fantasy thing to happen, nearly all of these robots would assume it was just an equipment error. and only one of them would get suspicious. The story ends with the Sonic Generations time gears behind one of them from Sonic Generations. It only existed because the plot of that specific game happened. Wait, is this spoiling that Silver was facing off with the Time Eater? That'd be disappointingly unoriginal. It was interesting to see a story by Even where Silver's future is a dystopic city where not reporting for work gets hunted down by a robot. A little tidbit that made me interested in learning more about the city. But it was so distracting that one, having a future that's a futuristic dystopic city is much more overdone than what 06 did. This is too depressing. And it doesn't have Eggman as the one ruling them. Instead it's these weird looking councilmen. So it doesn't even work for making Eggman's rule developed on. Are they intentional successors to Eggman? Worst of all, it was really off-putting and jarring that Silver has always been hiding his telekinesis from the people, and just got found out by Vaughn when he's not okay with people being arrested for a petty reason. I expect Silver to have always been fighting robots with his extremely overpowered telekinesis. But I guess this makes more sense. He really wants to have a normal life, and can't live with a normal house and have money if he's wanted for robot destruction. It's just inherently weird to put Silver in this underdog role, when he's way more powerful than any robot, let alone the city council. But I guess it's justified. Still, I'm just wondering how any dictators could exist near Silver instead of Silver using his telekinesis to take them down immediately. Silver's a hero, not a cowardly civilian who would say no to freedom fighting. Even the games were written better because either this kind of city was not a thing, or his future was happy, if off-screen, which he'd of course guarantee. Bottom line is, the story was really confusing. Maybe it would have made sense if it was Blaze instead of Silver. But Blaze couldn't have closed the portal. He obviously would have been able to fly out of the portal immediately. That was so frustrating and slow-paced.